Secretary, please read.
Senate Resolution 54 by Senator Hall relative to Black History Month.
Yes. Madam President, as Vice Chair of the California Legislative Black Caucus, I rise to present SR 54, which recognizes February 2016 as Black History Month. Black History Month is a time when we remember and commemorate the lives of African Americans who have had a positive impact on our society. Together, we must find ways to preserve Black history so that we can keep the hopes and dreams of those that struggled before us alive and relevant today. We have all heard the struggles and the stories of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Rosa Parks. These stories are reiterated over and over again because they had a tremendous impact on the civil rights movement and Black American history. However, I feel that Black History Month should go further and should also shine a light on African Americans who have also had a significant impact on the way our country lives and the way our country lives and reflect each and every day. People like Frederick Jones, who invented a refrigerating system for long-haul trucks back in 1935, or Henry Sampson, who was awarded a patent in 1971 for the device that could send and receive audio signals that technology uses for our modern-day cell phones today. We must continue to reiterate the fact that Blacks offered an array of benefits to society. There are several unsung and sung heroes, pillars of the African American community in the forefront and in the background, whom all deserve to be appreciated and commemorated. You will hear about some of the African American heroes and sheroes today, as 12 of them have been chosen by the California Legislative Black Caucus to be honored for their many contributions and accomplishments in California. The California Legislative Black Caucus has also provided educational resources. 4 large posters are currently hanging in our state capitol's rotunda. These posters reflect not only the 12 impressive people being honored here today, but also highlight other African American heroes and historic African American sites. I would like to take this moment to remember every single person, regardless of race, regardless of sex, regardless of religious affiliation or sexual orientation, who participated in these numerous marches, sit-ins, boycotts, and our struggle for freedom. I would also like to utilize Black History Month to salute everyone who refused to turn a blind eye but opposed the mistreatment of African Americans when nonviolent protests were set to meet violence, and those peacefully who marched were violently beaten by brutal police dogs. The support received across our country by these marvelous, courageous individuals is what prompted a significant portion of change. Importantly, the same fact remains true today. Support from good people is what will continue to make our country and the great state of California a better place to live, a better place to work, and a better place to raise our families. I respectfully ask for your aye vote on SR 54.
Thank you, Senator Hall. Moving to discussion and debate, Senator Mitchell.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I'm pleased to join with my colleague, Senator Hall, and stand in support of SCR 54. As you all know, this month allows each and every American to celebrate and reflect on the achievements, talents, and rich traditions of African Americans throughout our country's history. As Senator Hall said, I too encourage you all to go to the second floor rotunda to take a look at the amazing historical display there. Even the title of the display, Hallowed Grounds, reflects what the 12 African-American honorees the Black Caucus has brought to Sacramento today, as well as former sitting members of this legislature. So I encourage you to take some time over the course of the month to take a look. I'd also like to personally take this opportunity to not only acknowledge the prominent African-American leaders who courageously fought to advance civil rights, but to also pay tribute to what we are calling the unsung heroes and sheroes, trailblazers who have often been overlooked, silenced, or forgotten. Case in point, 1955, a 15-year-old African-American girl by the name of Claudette Colvin was actually the first person to be arrested for defying bus segregation in Montgomery. Her arrest and her story, unfortunately, has long since been forgotten, and it isn't often reflected in our history books. But it provided the spark that ultimately led to Rosa Parks' actions, the bus boycott, and the Supreme Court ruling to end segregation in public transportation. Another case in point, Mae Jemison, a physician and NASA astronaut who became the first Black woman to be admitted into NASA's astronaut training program. After more than a year of training, she became the first Black woman to travel in space. Stories of African Americans like these do not have a singular narrative, but most contain common threads of resilience and perseverance. These Americans are shining examples of a legacy that keeps our nation strong and makes our country great. There are many, many more names that can be added to that list that exemplifies the best that America has to offer, the best of Americans who stepped up when duty called. They broke color barriers and strengthened their communities through extraordinary, everyday acts of service and courage. That said, I'm proud to stand in support of SCR 54 as a member of the Black Caucus and add my voice in support of a resolution that recognizes the contributions of African Americans throughout the rich fabric of this country. Members, I strongly suggest that you too vote in support of SCR 54. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Mitchell. Senator Jackson?
I'm going to try again here. Thank you, Madam President. I, too, rise in support of this resolution. On behalf of the Legislative Women's Caucus, I would like to just point out a few of the extraordinarily outstanding women, some of whom we know today by name, and their predecessors who helped pave the way for them as we here in this legislature, on behalf of women, stand on the shoulders of women who preceded us as we continue to strive for equal opportunity for women in our world today. But I'd like to point out one of, I think, our collective favorites is the great poet Maya Angelou, and Still I Rise, one of the great poems, I think, of American tradition. But more than 200 years before that, Phyllis Wheatley, an African slave who was brought to Boston at the age of 8, paved the way for Angelou by being the first Black woman to have a poem published back in 1773. And of course, Sojourner Truth's 1851, Ain't I a Woman? One of the great speeches of equal rights at the convention there really inspired people like Congresswoman Shirley Chisholm when she introduced the Equal Rights Amendment, still unpassed, but introduced it back in 1969. And again, was the first woman, Black woman, to run for President of the United States back in the 1970s, and who reminded us that her biggest problem was not that she was an African American running for president, but that she was a woman running for president. And she was prescient enough to recognize and posit that we would have an African American male president before we had a woman president. And indeed, she was correct. Then there's Ida B. Wells, an investigative researcher on lynching in Southern horrors, allowed Ethel Payne, an African-American investigative journalist known as the First Lady of the Black Press, to be hired by CBS in 1972, making her the first African-American female commentator on national news, 1972. And of course, the great Althea Gibson, who was one of my heroes as a young woman growing up, was an African-American tennis player who broke the barrier in the sport of tennis, which I must tell you was a very difficult barrier to break, and I would suggest today is still a very difficult barrier to break. She became the first Black athlete to cross the color line of international tennis, paving the way for people like the great Arthur Ashe, paving the way for contemporaries. By the way, she was the first person to win of color to win the Grand Slam, to win a Grand Slam title. She went on to win 11 more. And today, we have Venus and Serena Williams, who have combined for 39 Grand Slam titles Serena Williams, arguably the greatest woman to play the game of tennis. These were examples and trailblazing that would not have happened but for the work that was done by these women previously. So as we celebrate Black History Month, let us remember the black women who made our history what it is today. And with that, I would ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Senator Jackson. Senator Pan?
Thank you, Madam President. Senators, I too rise in strong support of SR 54 on behalf of the API Legislative Caucus. Certainly, Black history is all of our history, is American history. And the history of the African Americans here in our country is one of, unfortunately, of oppression, discrimination, but also one of resilience and triumph. And this is a history that informs not only the African American community, but all of us, and certainly the API community, of what we still need to achieve here in our country to eliminate injustice, and also the way in which African Americans have actually trailblazed the way, not only for African Americans, but also for all of us who have suffered from discrimination and oppression. And those lessons need to be learned by all of us. And so it's most fitting that we commemorate this month, and actually every month of the year, and to honor and to support this resolution, SR 54, to ensure that those lessons are learned by all Californians and all the peoples, so that we can continue to bring a more just and equitable society for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Pan. Senator Anderson?
Senators, I'm pleased to rise in support of this resolution. You know, 6 years ago, I renamed, we all did, thank you for your votes, part of I-15 for the Tuskegee Airmen. The Tuskegee Airmen had 20 years prior to Martin Luther King on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial giving his I Have a Dream speech, under Jim Crow laws and facing racism in every aspect of their lives, went overseas to protect our liberty and freedom that we enjoy today. And then later, my colleague from Davis, she renamed part of, I believe it's I-80. In fact, I know it's I-80 because every time I drive by, I think when I see her signs honoring him with the Tuskegee Airmen Highway signs, I feel joy to see that. Bills and resolutions like this are so important to our youth, because I think that when people see the Red Tails or a show like that, they're thinking that that's more modern history. They have no idea that those men served under Jim Crow laws. And I think that this month should be named Black History Month, because I think it's so important that we pass on that history, that rich history of how great our country can become when we all work together. I urge an aye vote.
Thank you, Senator Anderson. Senator Block?
Thank you, Madam President. I, too, rise in strong support of SR 54 on behalf of the Legislative Jewish Caucus, of which I am chair. Our peoples, African American people, Jewish people, share much in common in terms of our heritage. Both people have suffered through slavery, have suffered through genocide, have suffered through centuries of discrimination, and have risen and triumphed over adversity. And I stand with Senator Hall, Senator Mitchell, thanking you for the resolution day, and celebrating with you also that this is the 150th anniversary of the 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution, an amendment that guarantees all citizens due process and equal protection under the law. Important not only to the African American community and the Jewish community, but to all of us here in this chamber. So in solidarity, I rise and thank you.
Thank you, Senator Block. Senator Fuller?
Madam President, members and guests, I am honored to rise today to speak in support of SR 54, recognizing the month of February as Black History Month. SR 54 recognizes African Americans courageously triumphing in the face of adversity and gives us all a chance to reflect on the talents, achievements, and contributions African Americans have made to our great nation. From Booker T. Washington to Jackie Robinson to Martin Luther King Jr., every phase of life that we know in America, every piece of history has been touched in some way. I personally got to hear Condoleezza Rice the other night give her personal story, and it touched me once again. Most of the experiences I had growing up in my little isolated, tiny agricultural town were from literature. Langston Hughes was my favorite. The Harlan Renaissance was a world that I could not envision, that I could not know, and that I could not touch until I read his As I Grew Older and The Wall Rose. And to this day, it still touches my heart, and many of the other great poets and storytellers of that time, because I learned that America was different. It was different than Shafter, California. It was different all across this vast nation, and we are all different and unique, as well as sharing similar characteristics. And so those stories made a huge impression on me, and getting to hear Condoleezza Rice the other night, someone who I really admire, haven't had a chance to know as well as I'd like to, tell her personal story about being a daughter of a pastor and being friends with one of those 4 girls that was killed in the church bombing in Birmingham, and how that felt to her, a living history for me that touched me very much. So I just want to say again that all of us in here share something in common, and that is that we want the best for everyone in America. And I have adopted Condoleezza Rice's summary because it meant the most to me and made me understand better the things that I maybe didn't experience as a young child. And that is that America ought to be what it says it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Fuller. Senator Hueso?
Thank you, Madam President. As the Vice Chair of the California Latino Legislative Caucus, I also rise in support of this important resolution. As many of you know, 2.5% of all African Americans in the United States are of Latino origin. The last Mexican governor of California, Pio Pico, was also, of course, an African American Latino. And there are many people in the Latino community that have contributed, or the African American Latino community, that have contributed to this country: poets, musicians, scientists, and I also want to recognize their contributions to our society. Let's not overlook the fact that they contribute to California's beautiful and wonderful diversity, and therefore they should be celebrated as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Hueso. Senator Nielsen?
Madam President, ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, I would like to acknowledge one who was really unsung, great in the eyes of some, but not much known. When Governor Wilson appointed me chairman of the Board of Prison Terms, the executive officer was a man named Ted Rich, a longtime public servant in the Department of Corrections in many capacities. But when I became chairman, he was then the executive officer. When I walked in the door, he was expecting that I would replace him. And I knew a little bit about Ted. I'd been on the board just a brief time. I came in and I looked around his office and I said, you know, I kind of like the decor in here, Ted. I like those pictures and the picture of your home. What is that house? Oh, that's where I grew up in Alabama. I said, you know, you had a better house than I grew up in. Yours at least had a porch. You know, I think we ought to leave this room just decorated as it is. He looked quizzically at me and I said, Ted, I want you to stay. That began a great relationship of teamwork, rebuilding that board, and what became as close a brotherhood as there could ever be. Ted grew up in Alabama under all of the kinds of challenges that many of you well know and stories that you've heard. He worked hard, became upwardly mobile, ended up in the military, came to California, and had postings in places where we're pretty lonely for an African American, including up here in Northern California, including up in Tehama County where I live, in Red Bluff. where there weren't many African Americans. But Ted, through his personality and strength of character, always was an example. Became well liked, always integrated in the community, and was a leader. And helped motivate and rebuild that board. Now remember when he was inducted into the Black Correctional Workers Hall of Fame, how richly he deserved that honor. And how stunned I was a few years later when I was inducted into the Black Correctional Workers Hall of Fame. He's dear to my heart and an African American who was a mentor, and more than a mentor to me, a brother.
Thank you, Senator Nielsen. Senator Hall, would you like to close?
Yes, Madam President, I respectfully ask the senators to join us in supporting SR 54.
Thank you, Senator Hall. Mr. Secretary, please read.
Allen. Aye. Anderson. Bates. Bell. Aye. Berryhill. Block. Aye. Cannella. De Leon. Aye. Fuller. Aye. Gaines. Aye. Galgioni. Aye. Glazer. Aye. Hall. Aye. Hancock. Aye. Hernandez. Aye. Hertzberg. Aye. Hill. Aye. Wesso. Aye. Huff. Aye. Jackson. Aye. Lada. Leno. Aye. Leba. Aye. Liu. McGuire. Mendoza. Aye. Mitchell. Aye. Monning. Aye. Morlock. Aye. Morrell. Wynn. Aye. Nilsson. Aye. Pan. Aye. Pavley. Roth. Aye. Runner. Aye. Stone. Aye. Vidak. Wykowski. Aye. Wolk. Wolk, aye. Anderson, aye. Berryhill, aye.
Please call the absent members, Mr. Secretary.
Bates. Cannella. Lada. Liu. McGuire. Morrell. Pavley. Vidak.
Ayes 31, noes 0. The resolution is adopted. 32. Ayes 32, noes 0. Measure passes. Resolution adopted. Senator Hall, for what purpose do you rise?
Yes, Madam President, privilege of the floor.
Let's proceed.
Madam President and Senators, I rise to recognize Sweet Alice Harris today. Sweet Alice Harris has dedicated her life to mentoring youth and providing assistance to people who are disadvantaged and underserved in the community of Los Angeles. She is a highly, highly regarded advocate who works closely with elected officials and often serves as a liaison between parents and their children's schools. Born in Alabama, Harris studied cosmetology before moving to Los Angeles in the late 1950s. She was educated at Pepperdine University, and she's one of our great doctors in the community of Los Angeles. She is the executive director of Parents of Watts, a social service organization that she started out of her home in the mid-1960s as a way to alleviate tensions in her culturally diverse neighborhoods after the 1965 riots. Affectionately known as Sweet Alice for her generosity and empathy, Harris collects toys and clothes that she distributes to children every Christmas. All of her children and many of the children she has mentored through her organization programs have gone on to attend college. And I can tell you that every Thanksgiving, she's providing thousands and thousands of turkeys and food baskets to the folks in Watts. And every Christmas, she gives hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of toys. You see lines around blocks coming to the home of Sweet Alice Harris, because if they do not receive a Christmas from any other house, they know that at the home of Sweet Alice Harris, there will always be Christmas. Sweet Alice Harris in the Watts community owns many homes on one block. And she purchased all those homes on one block, and she converted all those homes into mentoring centers, to homes for the homeless, for those who have been disenfranchised and in need of employment training programs. She's dedicated her entire life for that. That entire block, at least half of it, the homes, they're owned by Sweet Alice Harris, and we recognize Sweet Alice Harris for her contributions to uplift our community and to make sure that she gives hope to the hopeless in the Los Angeles Watts area. Members, please help me welcome and congratulate Sweet Alice Harris.
Welcome, Sweet Alice. Thank you, Senator Hall. All right, members, we are going to return to motions and resolutions. One moment. Privileges of the floor. Senator Mitchell, for what purpose do you rise?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, to continue with the Black Caucus Unsung Heroes celebration, if I may.
Please proceed.
As I've shared with many of you on numerous occasions, I'm a third-generation Native Angelino. My mother was a young social worker coming out of USC in 1958, and so I grew up hearing stories about Sweet Alice and the founding of Mothers of Watts in South LA in the early 60s. But I grew up directly witnessing the work of a phenomenal woman, and it's apropos that our gallery had school children here today to understand that there have been people for decades who've worked to make sure that education equity and equality was available to all kids. And I am proud to present to some, introduce to others, the first African-American woman elected to the Los Angeles City Council in 1991, African-American woman who served on the LA Unified School District Board for 12 years during a very tense time when the school district, like many school districts across the state and country, were debating school busing and how we could integrate our schools for better educational experience for all kids, and that is Miss Rita Walters.
Thank you, Senator Mitchell. Welcome. Thank you, Holly Mitchell, Senator Mitchell. And we will remain under privileges of the floor. Senator Mitchell.
Thank you very much. I just want to make sure that we also have the opportunity to share with members of the Senate the other 10 amazing unsung heroes and sheroes that the Black Caucus has had the opportunity to present to both the Assembly and the Senate. Last evening, there was a reception at the Citizen Hotel where we were all riveted by the amazing personal testimonies, the incredible stories of these unsung heroes and sheroes of the great state of California. The Assembly session just ended, and so we're very briefly, colleagues, going to introduce you to and ask that they wave and be acknowledged. We ask that you hold your applause until we get through all 10 of the unsung heroes and sheroes. Chair of the Black Caucus, Assemblymember Joan Sawyer's honoree this year is the Reverend Dr. William S. Epps. Assemblymember McCarty's honoree is Dr. Hazel Mahone. Assemblymember Cooper's honoree, Cassandra Jennings. this. Assemblymember Thurman's honoree, Ms. Betty Reed Soskin. I don't know that Ms. Reed Soskin would mind that I share with you that she's our oldest honoree this year at the lovely young age of 94. Assemblymember Holden's honoree, Mr. Danny Bakewell Jr., representing his father today, Danny Bakewell Sr. Assemblymember Cheryl Brown's honoree, someone who will be familiar to all of you, retired Assemblywoman Wilmer Amina Carter. Assemblymember Ridley Thomas's honoree, Tyrone Howard. Assemblymember Burke's honoree, Beverly King. Assemblymember Gibson's honoree, Mr. Timothy Watkins Sr. And finally, another very young, spry gentleman at the young, tender age of 93, Dr. Weber's honoree, former city councilman from San Diego, Mr. Leon Williams. Please give them all a round of applause.
Welcome, honorees, to the California State Senate floor. Thank you, Senator Mitchell. Moving back to motions and resolutions, Senator Allen, thank you for your patience.
Thank you so much. Senators, in addition to these extraordinary folks that we've been able to honor, we're actually in the presence of a governor here on the floor, a California state governor, though this governor has a full head of hair. And his name is Nicholas Gardner. He is the Youth and Government state governor, who is actually from my district, from Peninsula High School. And I'd like him to rise along with his friends from Youth and Government. They are here this weekend doing all this extraordinary work, examining bills, looking at important issues. He just had the opportunity to meet with the Senate President Pro Tem. His Chief of Staff, Julia Kahn, is here as well. Of course, my friends, Jenny and Jack. And then it turns out that James McBride, who's also a fellow Troop 2 Boy Scout, my old Boy Scout troop, they're all here. So in addition, my personal unsung African-American hero, Shiro, is Kristen McCowan, who I grew up with, who is now working for the Obama administration in the White House. And she came back she was a former state governor for Youth and Government, came back this weekend to volunteer for this extraordinary organization, brought her little baby with her. This is an organization that does such a great job of teaching the next generation about the legislative process. They are wonderful young people, and it's my honor to recognize them and introduce them today.
Thank you, Senator Allen. Senator Allen, we are on Journ in Memories. If you had one you would like to present, this would be the proper time, Senator Allen.
Okay, so I turned from a happy occasion to a really sad occasion. We heard about a couple of lives that were tragically cut short earlier today. And I was just devastated when I found out a week and a half ago that a friend of mine from college, one of the nicest people I knew, David Wicks, was very active at Harvard Hillel. He was an immigrant from the Czech Republic, from Czechoslovakia, came to school in the States, and we became good friends. And he's 38 years old, young wife, building a family, was coming out of the subway in downtown New York, Manhattan, and during the storms with those terrible winds, and this enormous construction crane collapsed and fell on top of him, and he was killed at age 38 in New York. We just had the funeral in New York. I wasn't able to go, but I've heard reports of just glowing and celebration of his life. I tell you, I've met a lot of people in my life. This is one of the most nicest, most fun, gregarious people I've ever met, and I just wanted to send my condolences to his family from the West Coast, and just hope and pray that nobody has to die in a ridiculous tragedy like this again.
Thank you, Senator Allen. Please bring his name forward so he can be properly memorialized. Members, is there any other further business before us? Seeing none, Senator De Leon, the desk is clear. Senate, there he is.
Thank you, Madam President. Colleagues, have a wonderful President Day's weekend. As you know, Monday we won't be here. We'll be here on Tuesday, and we will resume session at 1 p.m., not 2 p.m., but 1 p.m. on Tuesday. Again, have a very wonderful and safe President's Day weekend. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator De Leon. The Senate will be in recess until 3:30, at which time the adjournment motion will be made, and we will reconvene Monday at 1 p.m. Have a great weekend, members.